I don't know whether it'll get people going as much. It's a, but you never know. It's interesting in its own right. But it is as when I have the split to give these shiurim, so I try to connect some halachic topic to the Parshat Shavua, before we'll start with the connection, okay, which is really at the very beginning, the Ramban, the very first pasuk, and it's pasuk bet, but the first one is Daber Hashem Moshe Vel Aaron Leimor, so that doesn't count. But the Zod Chukat Torah. So in the discussion of the notion of the impurity, the tumat hamet, the impurity that that is created by death, really, with all of the different permutations from the previous years, we've spoken about different aspects of what this might mean in modern society, whether it's in hospitals, Kohanim flying, the different issues that are involved. So here, to the actual core of it, so the Ramban makes the following comment. It's part of a larger commentary, but this is the key sentence. V'tam tumat hamet. Why, indeed, do we say that there is any tuma at all? Why there's impurity to when that's exuded by a mate, by a dead person? After all, it is part of the life cycle. There's birth, there's death, and everything in between. So why should we view that as being something that is the Torah, not us, but the Torah should view that as being inherently tameh, and not only tameh, that is what we call the avi avot hatuma. Right? So why is that? So the Ramban says the following from a Kabbalistic perspective: Tam tumat hamet bi'etiol shel nachash. So it is the impact, the imprint of the snake, of the serpent in Gan Eden. Ki haniftarim b'nishika ein mitamin b'nadin. In other words, basically what the Ramban is saying is that since we all should have been immortal, had it not been for the first sin, and so at that point, and the Torah also talks about how in order that they do not eat from Eitz HaChayim, right? So they are banished from the garden. So so in effect, death is introduced through sin, through chet, and then he says, "Ki haniftarim b'nishika en mitamin min adin." He makes a radical statement. He says those people who merit to die not because of sin, but because from nishika, the kiss of God, the way that we speak about with regard to Moshe Rabbeinu and Aharon, that leaving of this world but in a way that I can't really explain it. I don't understand it. But in terms of this, that it's not simply the, if you will, the defeat of our mortal frames by death, but rather that it is that God taking away our soul in its purest form. Ein mitamin min adin. So a person who died in that way is not mitameh. V'hu she'amru, and this is the statement that is found in Chazal, Tzadikim ein mitamin. Tzadikim are not mitameh. V'lakach amar katuv, and that's why the Torah says, and this is the tie-in to the parsha, Zot chukata Torah. This is the statute of the Torah, kilomar hanechkeket min haTorah, which has been carved out of the Torah. Basically, this idea, this concept, right, that you have, it's not something which is necessarily even inherent to the human condition, but rather, it will become part and parcel of 99.99999% of us, but it is not a necessity. It's something that can be overcome, and that is that's the understanding. Now, continuing this line of thought, right, and then we'll get to Mearat HaMachpela in just 1 second. In a Perush, which is attributed to the Ramban, a Perush on Shir HaShirim, but but scholarship has it that it's not the Ramban, but rather actually one of the Ramban's Rebbeim, a not well-known figure, but an important Kabbalist in Spain, in Gerona, in the generation before the Ramban, by the name of Rav Shlomo ben Ezra. So in his Perush to Shir HaShirim, and presumably it touches, you could see the Ramban writing it based on what we just read. So who knows? Maybe this is the influence of the Ramban. Masha atat tzarich ladat. Number 2. Ki tumat hamet hu mitzad hamashchit hamemit oto shehu nikra yetzer hara. What ultimately causes death is this corrupting influence which kills, and that is Yetzer Hara. Kamasha Katov Hua Satan, as Mamar Chazal puts it, this is the Satan, Hu Yetzer Hara, Hu Malach HaMavet. Right? This is the Satan, this is the evil influence, this is the angel of death. Va'al Yetzer Hara ne'emar v'ruach hatuma avir min ha'aretz. And with regard to the Yetzer Hara, so sin and is called Tuma, as the Pasuk in Zechariah has it. V'omer v'tiharti etchem mikol tumotechem. And the Navi Yechezkel talks about how I will purify you from all of your impurities. V'lchein amru chachmenu zal al tzadikim hayaduim vav shisha shelo shaltu bahem malach hamavet. So there are 6 people who died, according to from a Kabbalistic perspective, that died without having been influenced by the Malach HaMavet. This is, I guess, the idea of Nishika that we spoke about before. And who are they? Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, Moshe, Aharon, Miriam, Dichtiv, Bahem al Pi Hashem. That they all died, the Pasuk says, based on the, literally, if you're talking from a Pshat perspective, al Pi Hashem means based on the declaration of God. And al Pi Hashem, this is the idea of the Nishika. The one, by the way, just those of you who will catch me from this week's Parsha, al Pi Hashem doesn't appear with regard to Miriam. And the Medrash says it should appear with regard to Miriam. Right, okay, correct. So, but it's not, right, so it's not, al Pi Hashem is not the, with regard to Miriam, because it would be unseemly to talk about God kissing Miriam. To say, in other words, in that regard. So, okay, fine. I said it. So we can talk about what imagery is seemly and unseemly. But that's the idea. But the notion of it being a mitat neshika appears, and Rashi quotes it in this week's parsha as well, because that's the first story in the parsha immediately after the description of the Parah Aduma and all of that. So then when we go back to the storyline, so the first incident that we're told is Miriam dies, and that's what precipitates the shortage of water and hitting the rock and all of that. So that is and Rashi quotes this there as well. But the idea is that in concept that Miriam is one of the 6 as well. Yeah.
So everyone apart from these 6 dies because of their Avera, and that's why they're tongue.
So I don't know. You can look at it as such, that everyone else has died. You could look at it as those are the 6 that the Torah tells us specifically that they did not die because of sin. And then it's open to anyone else. Even other people who died. It didn't say it with regard to Sarah. It didn't say it with regard to Rivka. The death of Rivka isn't even reported in the Torah. So does that mean that they died because of sin? Not necessarily. Right? But these 6 are the ones who definitely, at least from this midrashic perspective, did not die because of sin. There are other midrashim that talk about other characters, Yishai, for example, etc. There are different people who are included in this. The point is that it's a possibility. And the jump that the Ramban is making, because as I said, but whoever wrote the Perush to Shira Shirim didn't say this, is that there is no Tumah, you can make the jump, is that the Tumah is because of the Yetzer Hara, and therefore if you don't have the Yetzer Hara, there's no Tumah. But he doesn't say it explicitly. Here in our Parsha, the Ramban says it explicitly. Right? There is no Tumah. Okay. So this is a concept, and we're going to see whether halachically we buy that concept or not, or it's just something out there. But let's take a break for a second and take a look at the last page, right? To talk about just the structure a little bit of the Mearat HaMachpela. Because this is a question that comes up. You can, if you Google, right, Ha'im Mutar LeKohen Likanes Mearat HaMachpela, you'll get several answers to that question. It's a question that has come up over the generations with regard to going to Kever Rachel, with regard to going in, let's say, in Mearon to the grave of the Rabbi, etc. In other words, can a Kohen enter into? We're all familiar with the halacha that a Kohen cannot go into a cemetery, cannot defile himself with tumah, which we'll also get into. Like, why is that? We'll get to that hopefully by the end of this year, because after all, if you're already defiled, right, why can't you become? You're not adding tumah to the mix. So why can't the Kohen has already become tameh? So why can't a Kohen continue? And we touched upon in terms of going to hospitals a couple of years ago, question of with regard to Kohanim studying medicine, all sorts of issues that need to be touched upon.
What? It's a sign by this new spring bridge over the gate in Kohen that says that Kohanim should keep their hands inside, whatever it is. Be careful what you do.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. Okay. Okay. So.
The spring bridge across Cape and
I think that anyone on a string bridge should be careful. Otherwise you might add to the tumah in the world. But okay, we'll leave that aside for the moment. But now let's just take a look at a little bit about the. So here on the bottom is as most of us have visited. We've had the schut of going to Mearat HaMachpela. So this is from the angle when you're coming up, right? The area there where you see in the bottom right corner, that is the area where the so-called 7 steps were before they were destroyed in 1767 after the liberation of Hebron. So that's where non-Muslims were relegated to, the so-called 7th step, and they were not allowed into the building itself. The building, again, I'll just quickly go through it for those people who are not familiar. The building itself is Herodian. It goes back to the first century, maybe even a little bit earlier. I'm not sure. I would say the beginning of the 1st century. And it is, and you can see the same kind of stones that we're familiar with from the Kotel. It is the only totally extant structure of Herodian from that period of time. There are those who claim that it is the oldest surviving structure in the world in that regard. I guess the pyramids would come into would be more, but basically it's certainly as a site which is being where pilgrimages are being made to over the centuries and to this very day. So as an active site, so it might be the oldest site in the world, and that also means that it has the as opposed to Kever Rachel, with the question of is Rachel really buried? Is that Kever Rachel? Is that Beit Lechem that the Torah speaks of, etc.? I'm not going to get into that question, but that's an open question. When it comes to Mearat HaMachpela, so at least since Bayit Sheni, this has been the Misorah, that this is where the Mearat HaMachpela is. Archaeologically, it fits very well. Tel Rameda, which is about a kilometer away, up on the hill, and this is in Emek Hebron. It's in the valley. It fits perfectly as to what, in terms of what the Torah describes. So it's very strongly rooted in both in terms of the scripture itself, and in terms of the archaeological record. Now, inside, there's a whole story as to how we even know this. You can read up on it. Anyone interested? There are some pieces on the Jewish community of Hebron's website with different. And so there was basically it has been for at least I don't know exactly what point it became an operational mosque, but the Jews or non-Muslims were banned from it starting in the Mamlukite reign, so that's about 1200, 1300, thereabouts. When they were banned earlier, they were allowed in. I think it was a mosque before then. But the Muslims, because they're so it's a very sensitive site, as we're all familiar with. Already in 1968, so there is here in number 26, this where it says this lamp aperture. I think that's where she went in. Basically, I'm trying to remember what her name is. So she's a professor actually at the University of Tel Aviv. Her father was an aide to Moshe Dayan. She was 12 years old at the time, and thin enough to fit through this very narrow. I mean, they lowered her down a few times actually, and she took some pictures. She sketched what she saw. She wasn't able to go through that whole corridor there. It was blocked at different places. But basically not the cave structure, which you see in the middle, but on top she was able to see, she saw areas that were blocked. That's the last recorded entry into there until 1980. In 1980 or 81. So during Slichot, right, when the Jews, so they had a very long slichot on top, very loud slichot to cover for people drilling a hole in on the other side. I think on the number 26. Anyway, to go in to see what was there. And this went on, again, you can read all about it if you want on I think it's something like hebron.org.il, something along those lines. It's very easily found. Really fascinating stuff. Person who later on, who's really considered, his name is Noam Arnon. He's he wrote his doctorate about the history of Mearat HaMachpela. And he was one of the people who went in and they mapped out this area. They were able to get into. They cleared while it took again several hours while slichot were going on above, and to cover their sounds. And they went into that first cave. They found it's clearly really a Mearat Machpela, a double cave. In other words, there's an inner cave and an outer cave, and one cave is slightly more elevated. There's a machloket in the Gemara as to whether or not means it's one on top of the other or one inside the other. Both understandings fit with the topography. And in the inner cave is blocked off, and they weren't able to get into the inner cave.
They went all the way.
They went all the way to that. They went to the first cave, and they found. And they took out pottery from Bayit Rishon in there. So that means that this is goes even earlier than it was a burial site, and they found human bones there as well in the outer cave, which means that along the lines of what let's say Har Zeitim, where the assumption is that it's the inner cave where the avot are buried, but in the outer cave, so then you have the people were burying their dead to be near the avot. It's a type of thing. This is all you can read about it, etc. So that's the structure. And now, just in terms of looking at it from the outside, that blocked off aperture, where it says in the top right corner, okay, that blocked off aperture, that's right by the 7 steps, the lower right corner of the Mearat. So the assumption is why did they build those 7 steps to get up to there? Like, what was the point? Like, it's kind of, okay, 7, 8, 33. It doesn't care how many steps there are, but they're saying, why did they build steps in that corner? Right? So you think it's okay, it was just arbitrary that they wanted to be near the Mearat, and this is where the Muslims let them go. Okay, maybe. But what makes more sense is that there was an entrance which has been since sealed, and that's actually why they removed those steps. The Moshe Dayan wanted to try to find the entryway. But there is that entryway where it says blocked off aperture. That's where it is, turned to the ground. And basically along the lines of the same time, if you go to what's called the Kotel HaKatan, in the Ira Tika, and there's a further in from the main Kotel, continuing into the Muslim quarter, so you can go into a place which is called the Kotel HaKatan. It's the same Kotel, it's just that it's a little bit off the beaten track, and there's a sign there, Keneged Kodesh HaKodashim. In other words, where the assumption was, where the Kodesh HaKodashim was, so that's where you're standing in a direct line at that point. In terms of your tefillot, you're as close as you can get to the Kodesh HaKodashim, because Kodesh HaKodashim was built from the east to the west, so the western side is where the Kodesh HaKodashim was. So you're as close as you could possibly get in a straight line. So along the same lines, this is why the steps were built there. In other words, the assumption is that there was an opening, and people were aware of that opening, and that's there. After all, you see the corridor. There are steps there. A corridor is clearly an area that was designed for visitors to come in originally, and so the tefillot were as close as you could get in a direct line to the Mearat. Okay, so that's the topography. So now, with that in mind, and this is, we'll get back to it. A major question, and I guess the simplest question, which I'm not going to really get into because it's somewhat complex and esoteric, is the question of, with this structure, is there tuma if you're on the top floor? In other words, because of the different levels that are here, right, and if they're sealed off, so then I think everyone would agree. But first, there was always a question: is there anyone buried there? But that already, I said in 19. That's the last, at least, known visit into the depths of the Mearat because of the very sensitive religious and political implications that are involved. So that was shown that there are bones there. Right? So there are definitely bones, but the question is, the way that the structure is designed, will you be protected from Tumah if you enter the building and you're walking on that top floor where the numbers are? Okay, that's the question. Because the actual building, right, it's, you talk about Mearat HaMachpela, but you have to walk up 3 flights of stairs to get to what we call the Mearat HaMachpela. Right, so that's not where the avot are buried. The avot are buried deep inside the ground, deep inside, several stories down. So now the question is, okay, does Tumah rise? Right, so that's really the major question that the poskim today deal with. And we'll come back to that. But before then, the question is, well, is that moot? Because after all, if tzadikim are not, Kivrei tzadikim are not mitamin in the first place, so then, okay, you can be open, it doesn't matter, right? You could go over and pick up the bones or touch the bones, and you would become tamei, because the tumah itself is something which is doesn't apply to them. I'll just add one more thing just before we get into the halachic discussion on that, is that it sounds a little strange. What do you mean? It's tuma, right? So how can you say that certain people don't have that tuma? Right? But the question is, like as I said, why is there tuma? Right? This is something. Well, again, we had a few years ago. We spoke about this in terms of the ta'amei hamitzvot. Right? So there's a statement by Rabbi Yochanan, who said that it's lo hamet mitamei, v'lo ha'efer mitaher, right? But it's a gzeira. There isn't. It's not something which is physical, and that's something which you can say there is tuma. Period. But rather, it's a gzeira min hamakom. And if there's a gzeira min hamakom, if you're taking that approach, so then you could say, okay, there's a gzeira min hamakom that some people aren't tameh.
Yeah, but
Right?
the wives are tameh.
Right.
Sorrows.
Okay, maybe if Sarah is not included in this, you're right. Maybe we don't know. In other words, we have the six, but again, it's the six who were mentioned by a Rav Shlomo ben Ezra from the 13th century. Other people might argue that no, yeah.
No, if you say that other Jews were buried in the Mearat,
Okay, so all of that, those are the part of the halakhic arguments. But before let's go, with this background. Right, let's take a look at some of the discussion. So, is there any halachic? I have, let's say, a healthy respect for Kabbalah, but on a halachic level, right, is there something to this notion that Kivrei Tzadikim are not metameh? And the truth is that it's found in certain discussions in the Gemara. So here we have an instance. The Gemara, we'll see with the Bavli equivalent, the Yerushalmi says the following, number 3. Maushi tamei Kohen l'chvod hanasi. Can a Kohen become tamei in order to give proper respect to the Nasi, to the prince, the president, who passes away? Can a Kohen become tamei? So the Gemara says, Kadamach Rabbi Yehuda Nisai. When Rabbi Yehuda, the prince, meaning Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, the author of the Mishnah, so when he passed away, Achriz Rabbi Yanai v'Amar Ein Kuhuda Hayom. So Rabbi Yanai made the following pronouncement: today there is no Kuhuna. Right? So meaning that yes, you can. Kohanim should become tameh to escort Rabbi Yehuda Nasi to burial. Kadamach Rabbi Yehuda Nisai bar bereid Rabbi Yehuda Nisai. So when Rabbi Yehuda Nisai, the grandson of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, so who was an important figure in his own right, and his kever is found near Tzipori today. So when he passed away, Dachaf Rabbi Chia bar Abba Reb Zera b'kinishta de gufta de Tziporin v'save. So Rabbi Chia bar Abba pushed Rabbi Zera. Rabbi Zera was a Kohen. And Rabbi Zera apparently didn't feel that Rabbi Yehuda Nisa, the grandson, was of a significant enough stature, because he felt, and very well might have been, that Rabbi Zera was the bigger Talmid Chacham than Rabbi Yehuda Nisa. Rabbi Yehuda Nisa was a political position as well, to be the Nasi. It wasn't just a rabbinic position, right? So, and so, yes, we have respect for Rabbi Yehuda Nisa, but he is not his grandfather. And Rabbi Zera didn't want to become Tameh, and Rabbi Chia bar Abba pushed Rabbi Zera to make him Tameh. Right? So they would become Tameh, to say that yes, you have to give this respect to the Nasi, and we even are told where. It was in the Gufna Bet Knesset in Tziporin, in Tzipori, and he became Tameh. Right? So this was so halacha l'maaseh. When a Nasi dies, so Kohanim become Tameh. In the way that it's relayed in the Bavli, as part of the description, the Gemara in Ketubah talks about things that went on in Rabbi Yehuda Nasi's last days and his death. The Gemara says, "V'hamar Rabbi Chia oto hayom shemed Rabbi batla kedusha." Kedusha was cancelled. So the question, what does that mean? So the Tosfot there gives the following explanation. Number 5. Oto hayom shemet Rabbi batla kedusha, shayu karino to Rabbeinu HaKadosh. He's known as Rabbeinu HaKadosh. V'hadatanya b'shali, and this is what is mentioned in the Bright at the end of Sota, mishemet Rabbi batla anava v'yira. Yesh lomar kedusha b'chlal. In other words, what it means, batla kedusha means that Rabbi Yehuda and Hanasi achieved a certain level that from that point on, call it Yeridat Hadorot, people just haven't been able to attain. As it's being spoken, he was a type of person, the same way that we talk about someone like, maybe people say Lahavdil, how can you compare it to Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, but someone like Rav Kook. Just the scope of his knowledge and his talents. They say, okay, they don't make him like that anymore. That's the idea that the Gemara is saying, the Tosfot says. However, Harav Rabbi Chaim HaKohen. However, one of the Balei Tosfot, a student of Rabbeinu Tam, Rabbeinu Chaim HaKohen, he took it in a different direction. Haya Omer, Yimale Hayiti Ksheniftar Rabbeinu Tam. Had I been present when Rabbeinu Tam had passed away, if I had been in town when he died, Hayiti mitamelo, I would have become tameh for Rabbeinu Tam, for my Rebbe. Dahai batla kedusha de ka'amar hacha, haynu kedushat kuhuna. What did it mean, batla kedusha? It doesn't mean that there's this esoteric concept of kedusha that now we're not going to be able to attain. But no, there isn't kahuna today, right? That, like the Yerushalmi said. V'cheinu mucha midkamar oto yom mashma oto hayom dafka v'tulo v'hedya, meaning only on that day. So it's already a little bit different than what we were saying. It's not that tzadikim aren't mitame, but on the day of the death. So then there isn't then we have to explain why is it different on the day of the death. We'll do that in a second. Ubehedya, and he quotes the Yerushalmi that we read, Amar Yerushalmi, the Mesechet Brachot, Perek Meishin Meitu, the Kshemet, Rabbi Amru Ein Kuhuna Yom. Today there's no Kuhuna today. The Ein, so before we get into why, we'll finish. The Ein Dira Rabbi, so the Tosfot quotes his Rebbe. This is a few generations later. Probably I think it's referring to the Rabbeinu Shimshon Mishans. But anyway, the Keduma l'Rabbi Dahata Mayre b'Tumat Beit HaPras d'Rabbanan Aval Tumat d'Oraita Lo. The notion of Tuma wasn't the Tuma d'Oraita that occurred then, Tuma d'Rabbanan, along those lines. The Beit Yosef raises another question. Perhaps it's not anyone. It's not a Gadol Hador like Rabbeinu Tam was, but it has to be somebody who is the Nasi. Why should any of this make a difference? Why on the day of? Why should it matter? Any thoughts as to why the day of the burial is going to be different than subsequent days? Yeah.
Onan situation.
It's only one day.
Well, but it's like the Havdil, right? It's saying, okay, you only did cheeseburger today, right? It's only one day. Why is this day different?
Because you go to the tour, you go to the burial, but not the other days.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's an Onan.
Okay, so so it's related. It's not exactly the same din, but it's similar to the notion that a Kohen can become tamei and has a mitzvah to become tamei for a close relative.
What's the consequence?
So the practical. So what's that? We'll get to it. So this is what's going on. Is that basically we're saying even a Kohen Gadol is not allowed to become tamei for anyone other than any of his relatives. So it has to become tamei for what's known as a meit mitzvah. Meit mitzvah is a person who there is no one there to bury. And so the Kohen Gadol, or a Nazir, similar type of din, is commanded to bury that person. What the halacha here is saying, according to this approach, is that Meit Mitzvah has to be looked at a little more broadly. Meit mitzvah doesn't mean only that it's a question there's no one there, but that if the person will not be buried with the proper respect. So there are those who want to argue. The Torah, by the way, never says so explicitly in terms of, and if you read it on pshat level, you might even get the exact opposite conclusion of the halacha. The Torah never says explicitly that a Kohen can become tameh to bury his wife. God forbid. It's never mentioned in the Torah. The Torah talks about the other relatives, parents, children, siblings, but never talks about a wife per se. And there's a pasuk that you could read as saying that the Torah is saying that you're not allowed to become tameh for a wife, without getting into it. And it has to be understood through Torah Shebaal Peh in a different way. One of the explanations saying for why is a Kohen allowed to become tameh is because his wife, so you could simply say the wife is also one of the closest relatives, not just a blood relative. It's, that's the simplest way. The other way of looking at it is say no. A person burying a spouse, God forbid, is in a situation of Meit mitzvah. In other words, the responsibility falls upon the spouse, first and foremost, to the way that Abraham did for Sarah, to bury their dead. And anyone else who does it, it's no longer, you're not giving the person the proper respect. So the Kohen has to become tameh for his wife. It doesn't work with the Kohen Gadol. That explanation, because the Kohen Gadol does not become tameh for his wife. But be that as it may, you can understand the concept from that. And this could be what the Gemara is saying. In other words, a Nasi, who is the recognized leader of all of Am Yisrael, if all of Am Yisrael doesn't go to the funeral, doesn't participate, if there's a whole class of people, the Kohanim, who are not participating, then the Nasi is not receiving the proper kavod, and therefore the Kohanim have a chiyuv to be mitameh in order to give the Nasi their respect. And the question is, well, what about other people? Gadol Ador, does that fall to? Be that as it may, what you see clearly here is that, okay, even if you want to say this will not help you to tell you that tzadikim are not tameh. You might, if we had been there for the burial of the avot, maybe we could have become tameh, but not at this moment. Okay, another idea, number 7. Masa b'Rabbi Akiva. Story of Rabbi Akiva. Shahaya chavush b'veit ha'asurim. Rabbi Akiva was imprisoned. For Rabbi Yoshua Garsi Talmido ayam mishamsho, and Rabbi Yoshua was servicing him. Was helping him in jail to whatever extent the Romans allowed it. Erev Yom Tov niftar mimen v'halach lebeita. So it was Erev Yom Tov. Visiting hours were over in the prison, right? So it was, quite possibly in Caesarea, in the areas that today tourists visit, and he dies. He said goodbye. It's Erev Yom Tov. Ba Eliyahu va'amad al petach beita. So Eliyahu Navi comes to Rabbi Yehoshua and is standing at his home. So Marlo Shalom Malacha Rabbi. So Eliyahu greets Rabbi Yehoshua and he says, welcome Rabbi. Rabbi Yehoshua understands that this is Eliyahu Navi. Says Marlo Shalom Malacha Rabbi Umari. Amarlo Klum atat tzarich. So he says, is there anything that I can do for you, Eliyahu? Amarlo Kohenani, I'm a Kohen. Ubati lahagid lecha Rabbi Akiva meit b'veit ha'asurim. Rabbi Yehoshua comes and says Rabbi Akiva has died in prison. Miyad halchu shnehem lebeit ha'asurim umata petach shar beit ha'asurim patuach v'shar beit ha'sohar yashen. So they walk in, the door to the prison is open, the warden is asleep. V'chol ha'am shayu b'veit ha'asurim hayu shenim. Everybody's asleep. V'hishkivu et Rabbi Akiva al hamita v'yatzu. So they take Rabbi Akiva's body and they take it out. Miyad nitfal Eliyahu zachor l'tov u'vatlu al k'teifav. And so immediately Eliyahu takes it and takes the bita and puts it on his shoulders. Ukshara Rabbi Yehoshua Garsi kachamar le'Eliyahu Rabbi Elo v'artali ani Eliyahu Kohen. Didn't you just tell me you're a Kohen? How are you taking Rabbi Akiva's body out? The Kohen asur l'tamei b'meit. Amar lach dayach Rabbi Yehoshua b'ni chas v'shalom she'ein tumah b'tzadikim v'af lo b'talmideihem. There's no tumah b'tzadikim. So this medrash tells us, no tumah b'tzadikim. Along the lines of Rabbi Akiva, there are those. This is also part of the this discussion, there are those who want to say, as an expansion of this, that what does it mean to die without sin? So anyone who dies al Kiddush Hashem would fall into the category as well. In other words, it's not just, so Rabbi Akiva. So maybe it doesn't have, but especially since Rabbi Akiva dies al Kiddush Hashem, so then anyone who dies in that manner is not considered to be tameh.
What's the question of the Yohanavi for? The Yohanavi knows better than he does.
Okay, so there you go, right? So Tosfot doesn't buy it. Tosfot he's familiar with the Medrash, but he says, V'chein matzinu number 8, Shaya kover Rabbi Akiva היה דוחה שאמר לי וכיינך כהן אמר לי ZadikimCan מטעמים ודחה אותו כן משום כבודו. So the answer is that Eliyahu was being diplomatic. Eliyahu is not necessarily always known for being diplomatic, but here he is being diplomatic with Rabbi Yehoshua. The Rabbi Akiva, because of the honor of Rabbi Akiva, the ta'amo haya lefi shehaya meit mitzvah. The real reason is that Rabbi Akiva was a meit mitzvah under that circumstance. He's been executed in a Roman prison. So he is, and there are other stories which don't mesh. The more famous stories about how Rabbi Akiva dies, where there are many people around when he dies. But the point though is that at that moment Rabbi Akiva was a meit mitzvah. Lefi shahayu yireim lekovro shahaya meherugei malchut. Nobody wanted to bury him, but maybe he was being banned by the Romans because he had been executed. So this is an example. There's a Gemara though that seems to, and there are other Gemara that can also be brought, but there's one Gemara that seems to be specifically showing that there is Tumah for Mearat HaMachpela, specifically. And this is the following story. Rabbi Benai, and there's some historical, number 9. Rabbi Benai Abekemitzayin Mearata. So Rabbi Benai, I should have put the English here. Rabbi Benai was marking out the caves. Kimata l'ma'arata da Avraham, ashkacha li'Eliezer eved Avraham, dekai kamei bava. When he reached the caves of Avraham, he meets the servant of Avraham, Eliezer, who's standing there. Okay. Great story. Amar le, my ka'avid Avraham. What is Avraham doing here? Rabbi Benai is asking, can I go in? Will I be disturbing Avraham if I go in? So he says, Amar le, you'll know, Gane bechanfei de Sarah. What is going on? That he is sleeping on the shoulder of Sarah. V'kama'ayna le beresha. And she is gazing down on his head. In other words, a very intimate type of portrayal of the relationship between Abraham and Sarah, even in death. Now, very beautiful. But the idea being, why was Rabbi Benai doing this? Why was he marking off caves? So there's only one reason. I shouldn't say only one because some people try to give another explanation. But basically, the reason the Rashbam, the Parish says what's going on. Haya nichnas b'ma'arot u'moded midat orkan midifnim va'achar kach moded mibachutz. Why would he go into the cave? Go into the cave, measure, and then go up on top and measure outside based on the surveying marks. ועשה שם ציון סיד כדי להכיר מקום הטומאה ולא יביאו טהרת דרך כאן שלא יעלה לקבר. In other words, the whole why are things marked off? Kvarim, in order to protect Kohanim, in order to protect people who are trying to retain their tahara for different reasons. And so he's marking him off. Now, Rabbi Benai, by the way, is post-Herodian. He's post-Herodian. He's living in the 3rd century. So the building is there. And it's clear from this description, assuming that we can assume that it's accurate, is that the cave structures at that point were accessible, and perhaps what we call the top floor of the Mearat and HaMachpela might not have existed yet. That might have been a later addition. And what Rabbi Benoi wanted to do was basically mark off the area where Kohanim couldn't go, right? Because of the caves underneath. So that was so two things. First of all, it says that at least in theory it is Tameh, and that people cared about the tomb of Tara, and presumably there were pilgrims who were going, and Rabbi Bana is taking it upon himself to make sure that this area is that people could go and visit along the lines of what we do to this very day, to be able to visit the Kivrei Avot, and at the same time not become Tameh as a result. Okay, so that, yeah.
Is it only Tameh or just kever? Like when you go to cemetery, you want to know where the kever is, so you don't step on the kever.
Right. So that's the whole area. That's why he had to mark it off. That's exactly why. Again, if you're looking again at the structure. So if you are in that corridor, right, and you want to know how far you can go, right. So it's very helpful if there is a marker saying, okay, you can, you can't go into the lamps room. Let's call the lamps room today because the Muslims put down lamps through those holes, and you can't go there, but you can go in the corridor, or you can go part of the lamp room, or whatever it may be. But that's basically what's going on in this description of the Gemara. So it would seem, and by the way, halacha l'maaseh, there's a lot of discussion which I didn't bring down because I thought people would, I might overdone it as it is, but that the accepted psak halacha is Kivrei tzadikim are mitame. There are a decidedly minority opinion that says Kivrei tzadikim are not mitame, and therefore you could go into any place. In other words, you could go into the kever of the Rashbi, you could go into the kever of the kever Rachel, etc., etc., etc. But what do you mean? What's the consequence?
If you go in.
So for a Kohen like myself, so it's like eating a cheeseburger. It's like eating a cheeseburger. It's the same level of avera. It's the same love, and with less cholesterol. But basically, that is But in terms of the avera, it's like doing malacha on Yom Tov. It is a lo ta'aseh for a Kohen to become tameh. So, with regard to that, because I see that we have 10 minutes left. So there's the question. Okay, what about Kohanim today? Should they become tameh? So let's skip right now to source number 14. Hopefully, we'll get back to at least touch upon the ones that I'm skipping. So why should it be usher for a Kohen to become tameh today? Whereas if the issur is for a Kohen to become tameh, okay, I get it. Right? Nefesh lo yitama be'amav. Do not become. That's the pasuk in Parshat Emor. The Kohen is not allowed to become tameh to another human being. Okay, but if I'm already tameh, so what's the problem? I mean, I can't become more tameh than I can become. Doesn't matter how many dead people you come into contact with. Your tumah is the same, and that tumah will be removed one day, Bezrat Hashem, with the parah adumah. Okay, whenever that happens. So it doesn't matter whether you came tameh to one person or 1,000 people. It's the same halacha. So why should it be usher? So indeed, the Ravid, this is a well-known sheet of the Ravid. The Ravid says, Kohanim bizman hazen number 14, Tmei meitain va'od ein alehen chiyuv tumah. So according to the Ravid says, no, indeed, Kohanim are Tmeim, and therefore they don't have the chiyuv of Tumah. Anyone who says they do, alav l'havi raya. Right? The burden of proof is not upon me, the Ravid says, to say why they don't. The burden of proof is upon you. The Rambam, for example, says that the issur applies to Kohanim today as well. and that is the dominant shita. The Ravid is a minority shita. There are other shitot that agree with him, and I'll explain in a minute what that means. But the Ravid says it entirely. The why? What is the rationality? What's the proof? Okay, you have to bring a proof. So I'll bring a proof. And you can show the Mearat that seem to say it. Why isn't this the case? The reason is because the Rabbi is assuming the Isser is to become Tameh. But if the Isser is not to become Tameh, but rather to expose yourself to Tumah, or Tumat Meit, specifically, then, even if you're already Tameh, each additional exposure to Tumah is Asr. Right? So there's a whole question that comes up, and just to understand, the Kohen has to bury his mate. Why are as we are familiar with, the first row of, it's not of the Kivrei, but for Kohanim, right? So it's not just because so they can visit and stand outside the cemetery and see their relatives' gravesites. It's also because there's a problem of if you're burying the dead, you're taking the mate in, yes, and now how do you get out? Right? Because if you're inside deep, right? So you got there, but you need a helicopter to get you out, and then there's going to be a question whether the helicopter will even help you, whether the tumah goes into the helicopter. Okay? In other words, you can get there, but that is which leads us to another shita, which is Rabbeinu Tam. It's a sort of a cousin, related to the Ravid shita. He says that a Kohen can expose himself to tumah on the day that he buries a relative, but not on subsequent days. Why? What's the rationale? The rationale is that when it comes to, and all of this is in the psukim of this week's parsha, that it's a 7-day period to become purified from tumat meit. So if you push off that by another day or more, so then that's included in the Isser. But if it's on the same day, today, go ahead, party. Enjoy yourself in the cemetery. Because it doesn't matter. Because as long as you're going around, you can touch every grave, but it's going to be the same purification process. So it doesn't matter. That's the way that Rabbeinu Tam understands it. And therefore, there are those who want to say, based on this Rabbeinu Tam, already Balei Tosfot, want to say, according to Rabbeinu Tam, that in practice, he's like the Ravid. Because if we don't have a para aduma, so then it's the same as becoming tameh on the same day, right? Let's say today they announce we have the para aduma. Great. So everything I did until now, I could have become tameh 1,000 times on 1,000 different days. I have to start today. So as long as there's no para aduma around, so then a Kohen, if he's already tameh, according to this, can become tameh. The really fascinating snippet, which I'm not going to read, I'll tell you just outside because I want to at least touch upon what I skipped, is there's a question whether, even according to the Ravid, you know what, it's a good story, but I don't have time. You'll come to the end. Anyway, you can read the Ksab Sofer, it's really good. Anyway, so there's two other things that I want to get to in the 5 minutes that I have left. The number one is a really interesting question that it's all right. There are those who want to say that specifically when it comes to the Mearat HaMachpela and with regard to Kever Rachel as well, there's a reason, really counterintuitive reason, why Kohanim can enter, and that is because they're not Jewish. In other words, a halacha that some of you may be familiar with. It's a question whether, this is source number, source number 11. So the Shulchan Aruch just brings it's based on the Rambam, it's based on the Gemara, etc., that Kivrei Ovdei Kochavim Nachon Lizaher HaKohen Milelech Aleim. When it comes to non-Jewish graves, so it is appropriate for a Kohen to not to walk on them, meaning not to become defiled by them. And the Rama adds, Afal Pishiyesh Mekilin, and the Mekilin are a pretty significant list of people, including the Rambam. Nachon Lahachmir. It's better. So So, for example, this comes up all the time for Kohanim, right? This is a question of going into hospitals in Chutz La'aretz. This is a question of going into museums of natural history and the like, where you know that there are bodies that are being that are there on display. All sorts of things along those lines. Can a Kohen go into those places? So basically, the Gemara is saying that that this is based on is that the pasuk says Adam ki yamut ba'oel, a person, an Adam dies when he dies in tent, and then that becomes tameh. And the Gemara says Atem kruyin Adam v'lo anochri. That because of this is in itself a question. It was basically the tuma of a tumat mate only applies in terms of ohel, not in terms of touching the mate. This also is a question with regard to Kohanim studying medicine. There are those who allow Kohanim in Chutz La'aretz to study medicine as long as they don't actually touch a cadaver, and they, which is kind of hard to do. But in order to not touch a cadaver and only observe it and be in the same room as the autopsies and the like. But this heter only applies with regard to tumat oel, being in the same confines with the mate and not with not touching the mate. So the question is, well, now would that apply to people who died before there was Matan Torah? In other words, was Abraham the first Jew? In that, or is he spiritually the first Jew, but halachically not? Halachically, he's still considered to be a guy, right? B'nai Noach, and that he's treated as Ben Noach. Okay, is Adam Harishon karoi Adam? Right? So that's the question in this regard. Right? So how can you view it in this way? So here there are those who want to make that claim. So Tosfot, again, this is the same Tosfot that we were reading before in that Gemara where Rabbi Bana is marking off the graves. So he says the following. Tosfot says, Mishum de kever satum tuma bokad va'olah. When you have a sealed grave, the tumah goes up and down. V'im tomar. V'ha ein kivrei ovdei kochavim mitamim ba'olah. Right, so it's not, it's Bali Tosfot asking the question, Mishum de ein kruin Adam. So they give a couple of, we won't get into, he gives more technical answers. We'll just take a look at the last line. Yesh lomar da Avram nikra Adam, dichtiv ha'adam hagadol. This is not v'chein Adam harishon u'lahachi ein l'ma'atam nikra da Adam. In other words, some people, even though it's great people from the time before Matan Torah, can be Adam. Like Adam Harishon is going to be Adam, no matter what you do. And the Ramban on his comment says, Lo yadati lama tzien ela mipidei kvodam sharei kimu v'kiblu aleihem Torah. In other words, the fact is that if people reach the highest spiritual level, whatever that means, that they accepted Torah before Matan Torah, you reach the highest spiritual level, to say that Abraham isn't a Jew is kind of ridiculous. Basically, that's what the Ramban is saying. So therefore, you can't get around it with the technicality to say that they're not really Jewish and therefore not a Tameh. So now, can a Kohen go into Mearat HaMachpela? So the answer is, based on all of this that we've seen, is that no, you can't. From the perspective of the Tumah, if you know for a fact that the Tumah is entering in that third floor, so the Kohen cannot. The question then is, well, do we know for a fact that because it's based on the structure? So there, halacha l'maaseh here, there is a bit, more than a bit of discussion of poskim of the last 40, 50 years in this regard. Very early on, Rav Mordechai Eliyahu was of the opinion that based on his research, the structure of the Mearat HaMachpela, the structure of Kever Rachel, allowed for Kohanim to go in. If you read other poskim, even earlier, when it was a moot question, it was more regard Kever Rachel, because again the Muslims didn't let people in. But for the last 200 years, these questions have been 150 years. These questions have been coming up. And most poskim say that it's asur. Mordechai Eliyahu wanted to say that it was mutar. And based on a lot of the research that's been done until now, a lengthy volume was published about 20 years ago or so. Someone who did research based on the archaeological research, etc., to show that really there isn't an issue at all. And there are many Rabbanim today who give the psak halacha that Kohanim can go in. Many Rabbanim say the Kohanim should still refrain from it. Rav Lior, who's the Rav of Hebron, so again, I heard this the first time about 20 years ago, maybe even a little bit earlier. So he said that it was mutter. And someone asked him in these words that if you were a Kohen, would you go in? And he said no. So, okay. So now, but I was told afterwards that he recanted that. And I just want to close with the following piece, which was published by Rav Shmuel Eliyahu, the son of Rav Mordechai Eliyahu Zatzal, here in 2013. He wrote this, Mori Rabbi Abba. It's a great story. This is like, that's why it's even better than the one that I read before, that I skipped before. Mori Rabbi Abba Zatzal, Haya Moreh LeKohanim ki mutar lehem likanes lekever Rachel or Mearat HaMachpela, or lekever Shmuel Haramati. Nabi Samuel also, in north of in north of Yerushalayim. Anyway, you can go in. Aval lo l'shar kivrei tzadikim. Amar, because the issue is the structure, and not that Kohanim cannot be Kohanim asur likanes l'kivrei tzadikim. K'mo l'chol kever acher. The whole idea of not becoming tamei to kever tzadikim doesn't apply. Aval b'mkomot elu akvarim nimtzaim amok ba'od ba'adama v'lachen mutar l'kohanim likanes sham. So it's more complicated. It's not just a question of the depth. It's a question of the structure, that there is a dome which protects the tumah from going out. Haya ragil omar shepsak halacha hazeh eino l'toshavei Hebron. But he wouldn't. But if you live in Hebron, you can't rely on me. Why? Kevan sheyesha mara da'atra harav hagon harav dov lior shlita. Since Rav Lior is there, shebad l'chaim arukim, and v'hu chalak al psak halacha hazeh v'asar l'kohanim likanes l'mearat HaMachpela. So since Rav Lior was of the opinion that you can't, and so he said you have the Hebron Kohanim have to respect Rav Lior and they can't go in. Va'amar harav Zatzal, ki toshavei Hebron chayvim l'shmor l'rav ha'ir shelahem, period. Ka'avor shanim nichnesu rabbanim toshavei Hebron l'ma'arav b'ishon laila. So that story of 1981 that I told you about. ובדקו את המקומות וראו מה שראו, והרב עידו אלבה שליטה כתב על כך ספר מדוע יש להתיר לכהנים להיכנס למערת המכפלה. So based on that Leila Slichot, so a whole sefer was written to explain the structure and why Kohanim can go in. And Harav Dov Lior Shlita Natan Haskama LaSefer. So Rav Lior gave a Haskama to the sefer. Aval Katav Bo Ki HaMahadrim Lo Yikansu L'Sham. Right? I wouldn't go in, but you can go in. So based on that, right? So he said the following. So Lachar Rav Lior Datan Atzal Bato Amar Rav Zatzal. So my father said, Ki Gam L'Toshavei Hebron Mutar Likanes L'Mearat HaMachpela. So Rav Lior is okay. Okay, Amanat L'Teit Makom L'Tumah L'Tzeit. Ufi Zeh Gam HaMahadrim Yicholim Ka'ed Likanes. They made some holes in that the tumah goes out in other directions, again without getting into all the details of why that should matter, right? However, this is the part of the story that I just love. Okay, I'm sorry to be going over, but it's such a good story. Lachar shichur beit lechem b'milchemet sheishat hayamim. Ba Rav Zatzal, right? Rav Eliyahu, Rav Tzvi Yehuda Kohen Cook Zatzal. Right now, Mearat Kever Rachel has been liberated, and Hisbir lo lama kohanim yicholim likanes lekever Rachel. So, based on his research, he shows why Kohanim could go in. Ve'ein ba'aya shel tumat meit b'davar ki Rachel kvura lamata ve'ein lamala ba'aya shel oel v'chein dato kedusha shemutar lekohanim likanes lemearat HaMachpela. Shama harav Tzvi Yehuda v'hishtachnea. Rav Tzvi Yehuda was convinced. La'achar shechazar misham Rav Tzvi Yehuda shalo Arav nu nichnasta. So Rav Tzvi Yehuda went to visit Kever Rachel, Mearat HaMachpela. So he said, "Okay, I convinced you. Did you go in?" Anar Rav, lo, I didn't go in. And so he said, "Nachon ispartali b'tuv tavidat shemutar." Didn't you tell me? Didn't you say you convinced me? Yes. Aval heyot she'abel sheli lo nichnas. So Yehuda said, since my father, Rav Kook, didn't go in, as gam ani lo nichnas. I'm going to go in. I'm going to say my father was wrong. Harav shibeach ma'od shuvaza. So my father, Mordechai Eliyahu, said that's a good answer. So even if it's mutter, so I have yet to go in. I can't tell you. Personally, okay, so we should be zocha to have some para aduma, and we should all become tired.
I don't quite follow what the whole concept of